I really like this idea, the politics of energy, or the energy of politics. Um, and I was kind of curious if you could go into that a little bit more and just completely enlighten my
Huh?
mind and those who are watching right now.
Well, I think it's really changed in recent years. For a long time, at least for US and also for foreign politics too, especially in Western Europe, it was all about working towards more energy independence so that essentially, the main feedstock of your economy would be independent of countries that might have different decision makings or be processes or be undemocratic. But I really feel like that's changed in recent years. And
How so?
well, so like a lot of people talk about how politics has been more divisive than it ever has been. And you could come up with many different reasons from that, whether that be media. It's almost become like a sporting event in a way. And I some of these core elements of it, at least for the Democratic side, you always had an environmental group, but at least with my impression growing up in that community, a lot of people still realize that oil and gas was a fundamental input of our economy, and it was really important for us to have domestic production of that, because kind of I would say the overreaching fear was that a lot of people felt that maybe this was one of the reasons that we went to Iraq, was to protect our oil supplies that kind of really kept our economy going. But in recent years, I just feel like the rhetoric around it has become really emotionally charged, and um, kind of really lost that element that we used to have that was really shared from a bipartisanship level. So it's a good topic to, if you want to divide people and get people emotionally out to the polls. It's kind of like the shock and awe when you tell people that uh, an industry is killing everybody. It's going to motivate a lot of people to vote like that. Um, but
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit because I remember growing up here in Oklahoma that oil is kind of one of our foundations. It's really a bigger part of the economy than I think sometimes Oklahomans remember until there's a bust going on. And then it's like, oh, yeah,
yeah,
and we really are
definitely.
kind of oil dependent. And I know right now everybody is going crazy because gas prices, depending on where you live, in Oklahoma, they've gone up about $2 a gallon.
Yeah,
And you might see my cat in the background.
that's awesome.
That's Howie. But everybody's freaking out about $2, and of course, people are now saying like, "Well, hey, gas might be going up another $5 to $6 a gallon on top of what it already is before all the stuff in Russia and Ukraine are finished." But why is it that? Hold on, just one second. Yeah, so everybody's concerned about Russia and Ukraine and the fact that gas is going up. It's going up about $2 right now, and some people are saying it's going to go up as much as $6 more, 5, $6 more. But are we really as depleted oil wise that the Russia Ukraine connection really affects us in the United States that much?
I would say $5 to $6 is pretty crazy. I don't think it will go up that much, but I've had friends and other people that I know send me pictures of gas prices from other states, and $7 gas is pretty wild per gallon. It's about $4 here for premium, I believe. I checked the other day, so that's not it's pretty high compared to what it used to. And Americans love driving, they love cheap gasoline. A lot of people don't have the funds to basically buy an electric alternative car. And there's just a lot to it. Like there was a report that was written for California politicians that was released recently, talking about the shift to EVs on their energy grid. And essentially it was saying that they would have to double their capacity to handle all of it. So it's the Russian-Ukraine stuff is pretty interesting because it really had this behavioral finance effect where, you know, a lot of the market these days, or a lot of the trading volume is driven by quantitative trading, people riding momentum, trading momentum stocks. And I don't know how much that affected in it, but I think it really, I think Brent crude, which is kind of the international future, went up to $139 a barrel from about 100 within a very short period. That type of volatility is really difficult on some traders. Like I know a lot of traders had serious margin calls because they were using leverage to trade on those in their positions. And that's the type of stuff that, you know, if you look at 2008 with the credit default swaps, moves like that can really break a market and be contagious. And considering that oil is the largest physical market in the world, that's something that can ripple throughout entire economies. So yeah.
Yeah, so I get some of that, not necessarily to the same degree that you're probably saying it, but doesn't the U.S. have enough oil that we can just keep our gas prices low instead of having to? I mean, Russia and Ukraine, we don't really use that much of their oil, right?
Yeah, so Ukraine produces gas, natural gas, and they're mostly, I think, independent on nuclear, uh, like nuclear power. Part of the big reason why it was such a big deal, I think, globally and markets beyond just oil and gas was it's a huge place for commodity flows. So I think a third of the world's wheat flows through Ukrainian ports. It's a major pipeline pass-through hub for Russian oil and gas. And there's some complexities to it too, because I believe a lot of the oil that we were buying is heavy oil from Russia. And depending on whether it's heavy or light crude, they measure it in levels of API. It's kind of like a number to measure that. Different refiners will have to handle it differently. So there's a lot of refining capacity in the US to refine heavy crude. In past years, we purchased a lot of that from Venezuela. So Citgo, which is a Venezuelan-owned company, had a lot of refineries in the US where they processed their crude and then sold it here into gasoline to sell it into the US market. So it's, I think, like part of the worry on a fundamental sense was, could you replace that refining capacity with other stuff, with other crude materials at a similar dense or API level? And that has really what lately you've seen the US make movements to try to get on the nice list again with Venezuela and Iran, which is a very interesting thing. And they ironically produce the type of crude that these refineries need. So we do have a lot of the shale oil revolution, the shale gas revolution in the United States has been quite a miracle to see and to see it go out. But the oil and gas market itself is so complex, and there's so many different moving pieces in it. It's a global logistics market, and kind of to compare it to something else, during COVID, we saw a lot of demand for products, whether that be PPE or plastic products and stuff like that. Um, that really, I think, partially affected this ramp up earlier in the term, because you're basically, pretty much everything is made of plastic or plastic byproducts. So there was just a weird scenario. We saw it with like the logistics stuff, where ship capacity was very strained, and there was a lot of ports like Long Beach that was overloaded and had ships out there for forever, basically. So people weren't able to get their goods and services with a bottleneck. So I think, you've got this big old market that's ginormous, and there's all these moving parts, moving countries going together. If you have like a pipeline explosion in a country that's a huge oil producer, like that stuff is really going to affect the market and how these commodities are transported all over the world. We're less affected here in the US. The gas flow, the natural gas flows, was a huge issue over last summer, because like, for instance, wind capacity was below normal in Germany and UK. So they essentially had to use a lot more of their natural gas storage to basically bump up their power generation for summer cooling and other stuff. So it kind of left them in this dicey situation. And when you have, when a market is built around everything being there at the right time, and a big piece of it breaks, the market starts to break and goes crazy.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, then it really doesn't matter who sits in the Oval Office of the White House as far as gas prices, that there's a little bit more involved, or does the President of the United States actually have most of the power for when gas goes up or down?
Well, I think generally that's true. So generally it's geopolitical, more related. We really saw I would say, a entire transition in this administration. It's really like the green energy or die trying sort of stuff. Capital investors, like the people that finance all these products, and also with our government, kind of the import export financing, there's a lot of money flows that goes into that. And basically the president's signaling that he was going to shut down oil and gas in the US is naturally going to make investors flee. Those dollars are important in keeping balance in the market. I think a lot of people generally think that this is something like, for instance, you look at current administration has talked about wanting like 50% of our power generation in the US by 2030. It's just, it's not possible. So it, to really transition away from this entire infrastructure that you've built, that's all over the place, it's integrated, it's going to probably take 100 years. So it's, from an investor side, and this is a free market, free investor flows, they're going to want to put their dollars to areas where that can kind of be subsidized by the federal government, and also not be stuck with dead assets. So it's just kind of a, I think it was already moving in this way, where substantial money was flowing into ESG. And there had also been this period, a long period of time where it wasn't, people were making money, but it wasn't necessarily great returns, uh, developing or investing in oil and gas assets. It just kind of depended, but a lot of people saw a lot of capital destruction through it too, from basically over capitalizing the market. But we've really seen a huge swing, and having, like, say that the president says that they're going to outlaw milk tomorrow, you're not going to probably go buy a dairy.
Right. Let me pause you or rewind just a little bit because I want to make sure I understand this. So most likely gas prices would have gone up in the U.S. regardless of what's going on with like Ukraine and Russia, based on some of the things that the current administration, the policies they've made. That am I hearing you correctly in that?
I would say yes. So it's an entire shift away from where we've been. And I know the Trump administration took kind of like all of the above approach. Let's do nuclear. They said that they want to do coal too and support coal, but coal still kind of was, I would say the market was kind of destroyed during the Trump administration. It didn't approve. And ironically, with the attack on oil and natural gas, and some of these weird commodity flows and stuff like that, the increasing electrical demand over the earth, and a few years with lower than expected wind production, for instance, it's really, there's kind of been a global imbalance of the financing that you need to keep the system going. And it's just a weird, it's a weird time, right? We're a free market, and they're entitled to do that, but it's, there's not really a balanced, I guess, advisory group in there now. So a lot of the people that are involved in the economic energy analysis, the advisors close to the administration, have all come from renewables. So naturally, if you spend your entire career advocating for something, you're going to want to make that happen. And it's,
Right.
yeah, so I think it's kind of like it's a much differing ideology than we've had in a long time. And, a lot of people are happy that we have high gas prices, because that incentivizes people to do basically other things, or it becomes unaffordable,